Hello and welcome to our annual North Little Rock Wastewater Chlorine Safety Training. My name is Justin. I'm a Senior Operator and our Risk Management Plans Prevention Program Coordinator. Today we'll cover some general information about chlorine, what our uses are for it, and what to do in the event of an evacuation due to a chlorine leak. So our use for chlorine is to disinfect our plant's effluent to meet our fecal coliform permit requirements. We pump it as a gas into the effluent and detain the water for at least 30 minutes while any pathogens are eliminated by the chlorine. If you were to see the chlorine outside of its container, it would be a greenish yellow colored gas, and inside of the container it's stored as a liquid under pressure. If a tank were to get a leak, it would escape as a gas because it boils once it warms up higher than minus 29 degrees Fahrenheit. And since the gas is 2.5 times heavier than air, it would roll along the ground in whatever direction the wind is blowing. If exposed to chlorine gas, you would feel extreme irritation and or burning on your skin and eyes. If inhaled, it would cause respiratory distress and, depending on the concentration, may be fatal. Exposure to liquid chlorine, though very unlikely, could cause frostbite and chemical burns to the exposed area. Liquid chlorine exposure could only possibly happen if you were very close to a vessel as an incident occurred. The chart to the right details various levels of concentration whose symptoms range from mild irritation at the low end to death on the high end. It's worth noting here that operations receives a low-level leak alarm at 0.3 parts per million, and the plant-wide alarm sounds at 3 parts per million. A common industry-wide chlorine use issue is a poor connection between the container's valve mating surface and the regulator. The issue can cause a low-level leak that goes undetected for hours, perhaps days, until eventually building up enough gas that the alarm system triggers. With this new system, we place a valve actuator onto the container valve that is hooked up to our plant SCADA system. When the sensor detects a concentration of 0.3 parts per million, the valve actuator will automatically close, giving the plant operator a chance to fix an issue before it becomes an even bigger problem. But in the event the plant-wide alarm does sound, it's important to know what to do. This is what it will sound like if that alarm ever goes off. When you first hear that, don't panic and run for the door. Instead, prepare for a possible evacuation by gathering your essential things and being ready to leave. Remember, the alarm goes off at only 3 parts per million, so just because you hear it doesn't mean that there's a severe emergency and that you're going to be evacuating. The operators have 2 minutes to contact admin and confirm if there is actually a problem. Once the severity of the problem is assessed, the operator will communicate with admin whether an evacuation is warranted or not. At this point, admin will give a go or no-go announcement over the desk phone intercom, and the operator will give a go or no-go announcement over the mass messaging system. When an evacuation is called, do your best to observe the wind direction. You can look for the flags at admin or the windsock at the chlorine dock to help. Stay upwind of the leak as you make your way out. Part of what the operator is doing when determining the severity of the leak is observing the wind direction and communicating to admin whether the primary or secondary evacuation route should be taken. Our evacuation destination is the Rose City Community Center. Once you've evacuated here, gather together where your supervisors or their designees will take a head count. As part of our risk management plan's hazard assessment, I've modeled what our worst case scenario is anticipated to look like. Our worst case scenario is defined by the EPA as what would happen if an entire single container emptied out in 10 minutes. Showing here is the expected gas dispersal all the way to 3 parts per million. And to model this required simulating a 1.25 inch hole blown out on the very bottom of a tank. So this scenario actually happening would be extremely unlikely. The normal wind direction in our area would carry the gas to the southeast, but of course, depending on the wind's direction in that moment, the gas dispersal could blow out in any direction from the source. So, accounting for any possible wind direction, we can see that the Rose City Community Center still lies outside of the range of the leak in a worst case scenario. This is the alternative case scenario that our hazard assessment also requires us to do. With the alternative case scenario, we're given a little more leeway in what we model. So I chose to model the container valve blowing out of a full container. This is still very unlikely, but more plausible than a 1 1/4 inch hole randomly blowing out of the bottom of the tank. And with this scenario, you can see that the affected area is much smaller than the previous model. So based on those release scenarios, this is the primary evacuation route that keeps everyone most likely to be upwind of the gas. You turn left onto Bauckham until you get to Rose Lane, where you take a right. The Rose City Community Center will be ahead on the right. If the wind is blowing in the other direction and a gas cloud is blocking the road, then take the secondary route. Turn right onto Bauckham Pike instead of left, then take 440 north. Take the very next exit at Faulkner Lake Road and then turn left. Faulkner Lake becomes Lynch Drive at some point, but just stay on the road until you can turn left onto Rose Lane, and then the community center will be on your left. The operators have a unique job in a chlorine evacuation and have their own protocols to follow. After they've determined an evacuation is warranted, they'll stay on site to follow their own response plan, which may include contacting the fire department and providing them with our repair kit that they would safely apply with an SCBA system. Once the operations supervisor or his delegate are on the scene, the remaining operators would be dismissed to evacuate with everyone else. At 5 Mile, White Oak, and Maumelle, the protocols are going to be pretty similar. The operator on duty will assess a potential leak and make the call if an evacuation is required. If it is, then the operator will evacuate anyone else along with themselves that are present at the plant. The evacuation site for the remote plants is the Faulkner Lake plant. So let's summarize the chlorine alarm evacuation process. First, an alarm will sound and you should prepare for a potential evacuation. Operators will contact the admin building within 2 minutes. Wait for a go or no-go announcement. If it's a false alarm or a no-go, return to your normal duties. If it's a go, take the primary route. If it's not possible, take the secondary route. A mass text message will also go out to all utility cell phones and to employees that registered the cell numbers with the system. Go to the rear of the Rose City Community Center for a head count. Each department head or designee will take a head count. Do not leave unless you're released. The plant operations supervisor or designee will call HR to notify when it's safe to return. All off-site employees during the evacuation will not be allowed to return to the plant until it's announced safe to return. If we're unable to return, utility vehicles present will be used to take employees home. Plant operations personnel will remain on or near the site as per their emergency response plan. If you're not signed up to receive evacuation notices through the utility's mass messaging system, but you'd like to be, please let me know. Your information is only kept on our local SCADA database and it's not available online. The messages will either be chlorine or inclement weather utility closing related, and you can see your supervisor for a form to sign up. If you have any questions or concerns about anything presented here today, you can definitely contact me either in person or at any of the emails you see presented here. That will conclude our annual chlorine training. Thanks for listening.